Since the beginning of human history, we've tried to understand what good really means, what evil really is, and why some thinkers choose to flip the world upside down instead of simply explaining it. Throughout the ages, philosophers have been praised and feared. Some were called geniuses. One was burned alive. Others were exiled, silenced, or misunderstood so deeply that their ideas still make people uneasy today. But they all have one thing in common. Their thoughts challenged everything people believed, broke old certainties, and forced humanity to see itself in a new and uncomfortable way. Welcome to our journey through the 5 most controversial philosophers in history. He was called a heretic and a rebel of thought, names meant to warn and frighten, marking him as an enemy of the church, a man who refused to bow to the limits of his age, someone bold enough to declare that the universe was infinite, long before anyone else dared to imagine it. His words shook the foundations of the church. His ideas burned brighter than the flames that would take his life. Who was Giordano Bruno really? And why does his rebellion against dogma still inspire and challenge us today? Giordano Bruno was an Italian philosopher, priest, and cosmologist. He questioned everything the church held sacred, not to provoke, but because he followed reason wherever it led. In a time when the universe was thought to be small, finite, and centered on Earth, Bruno dared to imagine something far greater. He claimed the universe was infinite. No center, no edge, no above or below. The stars in the night sky were not fixed points of light, but suns, each with their own worlds. Perhaps even worlds like ours. For Bruno, the universe reflected God's infinity, boundless, eternal, and beyond human limits. His ideas went far beyond even Copernicus. They shattered centuries of accepted thinking. But it wasn't only his cosmology that put him in danger. Bruno rejected core Christian doctrines: the Trinity, the virgin birth, original sin, and the authority of priests. His pantheistic view, God is present in all things, was seen as blasphemy. Combined with his sharp tongue and uncompromising character, he became an enemy of both scholars and clergy. In 1592, he was betrayed, arrested, and handed over to the Roman Inquisition. For 7 years, the church tried to make him recant. 7 years of interrogations, threats, and silence. But Bruno refused. At the end of his trial, he said, "Perhaps you pronounce this sentence with greater fear than I receive it." On February 17, 1600, he was led to the Campo da Fiori. The flames consumed his body, but they could not touch his ideas. After his death, Bruno became a symbol of free thought, scientific inquiry, and the struggle against dogma. His willingness to die for what he believed makes him one of the most controversial and admired figures of his time. Giordano Bruno died because he believed that truth is greater than fear, and that ideas can never be burned. He was often called a dangerous thinker, an intellectual anarchist, a master of suspicion, and a provocateur of the modern age. Labels meant to warn, frighten, and define him in ways that reflected fear more than understanding. A philosopher who exposed power where no one wanted to see it, revealing how schools, hospitals, prisons, and even language shape and control people. Loved by rebels, feared by authorities, and unsettling to anyone who believed in order and normality. Who was Michel Foucault really? And why do his thoughts still challenge, disturb, and provoke debate today? Michel Foucault was a French philosopher, historian, and social theorist. He studied philosophy and became fascinated by power, knowledge, and the subtle ways societies shape human behavior. Over time, he grew into one of the most influential and controversial thinkers of the 20th century. His ideas constantly clashed with what most people took for granted. Foucault challenged the very idea of objective truth. He argued that what a society calls truth is shaped by power, through institutions like science, politics, religion, and education. Even our most trusted forms of knowledge are not neutral. They are constructed to serve the interests of those in control. His view of power was equally radical. Power, he said, does not only flow from rulers above. It spreads through families, schools, prisons, hospitals, and even language itself. Power defines what is normal, who is considered deviant, and how we understand ourselves. In Discipline and Punish, Foucault showed that modern societies have not truly become kinder. Torture may have disappeared, but new systems of control took its place. Schools, prisons, factories, and hospitals observe, classify, and train people. Surveillance replaces chains, but the effect can be just as powerful. Foucault also challenged ideas about identity. He argued that the self is not fixed or natural. Society creates categories, and we learn to see ourselves through them. The homosexual, for example, was not a concept in the modern sense before the 19th century. It was invented by doctors, lawyers, and bureaucrats. The figure of the criminal was similarly shaped by law and institutions. Labels define normality, deviance, and even our sense of who we are. Sexuality was another frontier of his critique. Foucault argued that what we consider acceptable, healthy, or deviant is shaped by power. Institutions and public discourse turned sexuality into a tool of social control. Foucault's personal life added to his controversial reputation. He was openly homosexual and deeply interested in sexual freedom, taboos, and the exploration of desire. Stories circulated about his private life, including his time in Tunisia in the 1970s, but there is no conclusive evidence of illegal behavior. What is certain is that he lived according to his ideas about freedom, the body, and desire, challenging social norms in his life as much as in his philosophy. Michel Foucault died on June 25, 1984, in Paris, at the age of 57. Yet his ideas, the hard truths about power, knowledge, and the construction of the self, still unsettle and inspire. He remains a thinker who fascinates, challenges, and disturbs, a philosopher who refused to leave any stone of society unexamined. He was given many labels: a manipulator, a cynic, a dangerous thinker. Names meant to shock, to warn, and to define him in ways that reflected fear more than truth. A man who studied power with careful eyes, seeing how rulers rise and fall. Even today, his name is linked to strategy, politics, and the harsh realities of leadership. Yet behind the label of Machiavellian stood a man who watched people closely and tried to understand the world around him. Who was Niccolò Machiavelli really? And why do his ideas still challenge and inspire us today? Niccolò Machiavelli was an Italian diplomat, writer, and political thinker. He served the Florentine Republic, working as a diplomat and secretary, observing how rulers gained and lost power. When the Medici family returned to power in 1512, Machiavelli lost his job, was imprisoned and interrogated. After he was freed, he retired to his estate near Florence and began to write. He is best known for The Prince, a book about how rulers gain and keep power. For Machiavelli, the survival and stability of the state were often more important than following traditional moral or religious rules. He observed that humans are naturally selfish and unpredictable, and that strong, practical leadership is necessary to maintain order. He famously wrote that it is better for a ruler to be feared than loved, as long as he is not hated. Besides The Prince, he wrote the Discourses on Livy, which support Republican ideas, and Florentine Histories, a detailed account of his city's past. He also wrote essays on war, language, and history. His work shows a wide intellectual curiosity and deep interest in human society. Machiavelli praised virtue, qualities like courage, decisiveness, and practical skill. He knew that life is unpredictable. Fortune, circumstance, and human passions constantly test rulers. His writings are not comforting. They offer advice for rulers facing uncertain times, showing how to navigate the dangers and challenges of political life. Niccolò Machiavelli died on June 21, 1527, in Florence, Italy, at the age of 58. Yet his ideas about power, leadership, and human nature still provoke debate today. He remains a thinker who fascinates, disturbs, and challenges us. He was called a nihilist, a woman-hater, a godless rebel, and a dangerous extremist. A thinker brave enough to shake the foundations of morality, religion, and truth itself. His words cut like blades. His ideas fell like bombs into a world that was not ready for them. Yet behind the thunder of his ideas stood a single human being. Who was Friedrich Nietzsche really? And why does his voice still inspire, disturb, and even frighten people today? Friedrich Nietzsche was a German philosopher, poet, and cultural critic. He questioned everything society believed about morality, religion, power, and human nature. His influence is huge. Existentialism, postmodernism, depth psychology, and much of modern cultural thought still carry his fingerprints. Few philosophers have changed the world so deeply. Nietzsche became famous for saying, "God is dead." He did not mean that God had literally died, but that traditional religion and fixed moral rules no longer held power over modern life. Humanity now faced nihilism, the frightening idea that there is no absolute truth, no fixed values, no guaranteed meaning. And on the genealogy of morality, Nietzsche asked where our ideas of good and evil come from. He argued that these values are not universal truths. They are created by history and social power. Nietzsche said there are two main kinds of morality. Master morality comes from the strong and creative. In early societies, good meant strength, courage, pride, and power. Evil meant weakness, humility, and submission. Master morality celebrates life, achievement, and self-expression. With the rise of Judeo-Christian morality, these values were reversed. Humility, meekness, and compassion, once seen as weak, became good. Strength, pride, and boldness were seen as evil. This is slave morality. It came from the weak, who could not take power directly. They created values that made themselves feel morally right. Slave morality is based on resentment and fear, not life and creativity. Nietzsche believed Western culture had been dominated by slave morality for too long. He thought it held people back and stopped them from reaching their full potential. As an answer, he introduced one of his most famous and misunderstood ideas, the Übermensch. The Übermensch rises above the herd, creates their own values, and lives boldly and creatively. Nietzsche also imagined the eternal recurrence and the idea of amor fati, the love of one's fate. He asked us to live as if we would have to relive our life over and over, exactly the same. Could we embrace that life forever? Could we say yes to every moment, without regret? His views on women remain controversial. The famous line, "When you go to a woman, don't forget the whip," appears in Thus Spoke Zarathustra as a shocking literary remark, not as real advice. Yet Nietzsche often spoke of women in ways that underestimated their equality. His attitudes reflected 19th century norms and his difficult relationships, especially with Lou Salome. He could describe women as powerful and life-giving, but he was still shaped by the ideas of his time. Like many of his ideas, his views on women continue to spark debate today. After his mental collapse in 1889, Nietzsche suffered severe neurological and psychological problems. He became completely dependent on his family and could no longer work or write. Many misunderstandings about Nietzsche came from his sister, Elizabeth, who managed his manuscripts after his collapse. The Nazis twisted Nietzsche's ideas. Hitler and the Nazi regime misused the concept of the Übermensch for their racist ideology. But Nietzsche's original idea had nothing to do with race. It was about self-overcoming, not domination. Friedrich Nietzsche died on August 25, 1900, in Weimar, Germany, at the age of 55. Yet his ideas, his challenge to morality, religion, and human self-understanding still echo through the modern world. He was called a monster, a devil, a visionary, a thinker of freedom, and the author of some of the most forbidden books ever written. His name even inspired the term sadism. In fact, he tops our list as the most controversial philosopher in history. But who was the Marquis de Sade really, and why does he continue to fascinate and shock our culture today? Donatien Alphonse François, born in 1740 in Paris, grew up in an aristocratic world shaped by discipline, hierarchy, and power. From an early age, he developed a rebellious attitude toward religion and morality, soon gaining a reputation as a libertine, someone who pursued pleasure without limits and defied social rules. His provocative lifestyle repeatedly brought him into conflict with authorities. He faced accusations of sodomy, sexual misconduct, and blasphemy, a mixture of real events, exaggerations, and politically motivated charges. At times, even his own family contributed to his imprisonment. Across his life, he spent roughly 27 years confined in prisons or asylums. Ironically, These years were also his most productive. In confinement, Sade wrote his most infamous works, often on hidden sheets of paper or scrolls. His body was locked away, but his mind remained free. During the French Revolution, he briefly engaged in politics and spoke against the death penalty, though revolutionary authorities found him just as difficult to tolerate. Later, some of his works, including Justine, were banned under Napoleon's rule, and Sade was again imprisoned. He died in 1814 at the Charenton Asylum, largely rejected by society, and requested no gravestone. Sade was far more than a pornographer. He was a radical thinker who attacked religion, morality, and authority. He believed in no higher order. For him, nature was cruel and indifferent, and humans were no different. Freedom, to Sade, meant the radical questioning of all social limits, even those imposed to maintain conventional morality. Yet he also held surprisingly modern ideas. He opposed the death penalty, supported equality before the law, advocated the separation of church and state, and defended sexual freedom. This contrast between his shocking stories and his political views makes him a singular figure. His books shocked because they broke taboos that still provoke discomfort today. He wrote openly about violence, power, sexuality, and blasphemy, rejecting conventional morality and turning literature into a laboratory of extreme human behavior. The 120 Days of Sodom, Justine, Juliet, and Philosophy in the Boudoir remain among the most controversial texts in world literature. In the 20th century, he was rediscovered by thinkers like Freud, Foucault, Barthes, and Deleuze, who saw him as key to understanding power, sexuality, and human drives. His influence continues to appear in literature, art, and discussions about freedom. The Marquis de Sade remains a man of extremes, an aristocrat cast out, a writer who pushed boundaries, and a philosopher who challenged certainties. His work forces us to confront the darker sides of human nature and to ask how far freedom in art, thought, and desire can truly go. If you enjoyed the video and want to stay up to date with the newest videos, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and click the notification bell for more mystery, storytelling, and psychological insights.